Have you ever noticed how often you feel the need to explain yourself? Why you reacted the way you did? Why you changed your plans? Why you pulled away from someone? Why you chose peace over participation? It sounds harmless, maybe even polite. But if you look closer beneath that gentle need to justify your emotions, lies a deep psychological pattern, a quiet wound that has followed you for years. Carl Jung believed that this need to constantly explain yourself doesn't come from clarity. It comes from disconnection from the self. It's not the voice of confidence. It's the echo of an inner child still asking for permission to exist. Today we'll discuss what truly happens when you stop explaining yourself, how this single shift can change your relationships, your energy, and the way you experience your own worth. We'll go deep into Jung's idea of the persona, the shadow, and the birth of inner authority, and how learning to stand silently in your truth becomes one of the most powerful forms of self-realization. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Deep Psyche, the channel that explores the hidden language of the mind and the spiritual transformation that begins within it. Now let's begin. To understand why explaining yourself feels like survival, you have to go back to childhood. Imagine a child trying to express something raw and real, maybe sadness, anger or confusion, and being met with dismissal instead of empathy. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. Don't make a big deal out of it. In those small moments, something inside the child breaks a little. They learn that authenticity comes with consequences. So instead of being, they begin performing. They shape their emotions into digestible pieces. They learn to translate their truth into what others can accept. That's the birth of the persona, the mask you wear to be safe in the world, Jung said. The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. You start believing that if you can explain yourself well enough, you'll finally be accepted. If you can justify every feeling, you'll never be abandoned. And so explaining becomes your armor, a way to control the chaos of rejection. But what begins as protection eventually becomes a prison. When you grow up, the habit doesn't disappear. It just becomes more sophisticated. Now you don't just explain your feelings, you explain your boundaries, your silence, your choices, your peace. You defend the right to exist in the way your soul needs to. Someone doesn't text you back, and you feel the need to explain why you didn't chase. You withdraw from a toxic situation, and you feel the urge to justify your distance. You prioritize your energy, and you find yourself writing long paragraphs that begin with, "I just want you to understand where I'm coming from." But here's the truth. You're not trying to make them understand. You're trying to convince yourself that it's okay to be misunderstood. The need to explain is often the child inside saying, "Please don't hate me for protecting myself." You're still playing by the old emotional contract, the one that said, "I'll be safe if everyone approves of me." But adulthood, real adulthood, is about breaking that contract. Carl Jung described most of human suffering as a split between the ego and the self. The ego says, "If they understand me, I'll finally have peace." But the self whispers, "Peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself." Every time you over-explain, you're choosing ego over self. You're trying to control perception instead of trusting presence. That's why explaining always leaves you emptier. Because it's never really about communication. It's about trying to rewrite someone else's reality of you. But the truth is, you can't. You can't control how others interpret your silence, your boundaries, or your choices. You can only choose whether you betray your truth just to make them comfortable. Jung would say, the need to explain is not just fear, it's also control. You're not only afraid of being misunderstood, you're afraid of being seen differently than how you want to appear. You're afraid of being perceived as selfish, cold, distant, or arrogant. So you use explanation as emotional camouflage. You want to control the narrative before others can distort it. It's the ego's way of maintaining its image of being good. But this is where your shadow begins to rise. Your shadow doesn't care about being liked. It cares about being real. It's the part of you that whispers, "I'm done performing. I'm done explaining what I already know is true. I'm done begging for understanding from people who only listen to reply." When you suppress that shadow, you become divided, half light, half silence. But when you integrate it, you reclaim your wholeness. There comes a moment in every soul's evolution when you realize how tired you are, not physically but spiritually tired. Tired of over-explaining your boundaries, tired of apologizing for your peace, tired of defending your intuition, tired of seeking closure through explanation. And then one day you stop, not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of awakening. You realize that peace doesn't require permission. You stop running after people with long clarifications and start walking quietly in your own knowing. That is the moment Jung described as the beginning of individuation, when you stop trying to be understood by others and start trying to understand yourself. You realize your truth doesn't need translation, your silence doesn't need justification, your boundaries don't need defense. They are sacred simply because they exist. When you stop explaining yourself, your energy shifts in ways that words can't describe. You begin to attract people who sense your energy, not your arguments. People who feel your boundaries, not your explanations. People who meet you through vibration, not validation. Those who only loved you for your compliance will fade away, because they no longer get the emotional control they once had. But those who love you for your essence will stay, quietly, respectfully, deeply. Your relationships become fewer, but real. Your peace becomes louder than your words. Your silence becomes your greatest teacher. That's what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you stop explaining yourself, you are finally making that unconscious pattern conscious. You're ending the cycle of self-betrayal that's been running your life since childhood. Inner authority is what replaces explanation. It's the calm voice inside that says, "I know why I chose this path. I trust my boundaries. I don't owe everyone access to my reasoning." Inner authority doesn't argue. It simply is. You begin to walk differently, speak less, but with greater presence. Your words begin to carry power because they come from clarity, not defense. That's the difference between a mind seeking validation and a soul resting in truth. You no longer explain your peace. You embody it. You no longer prove your worth. You radiate it. And those who were meant to meet you there will feel it without you saying a word. There's an incredible freedom in being misunderstood and still choosing peace. You realize that misunderstanding is not rejection, it's just perspective. And you no longer need to manage every perspective to feel safe. Being misunderstood doesn't mean you're wrong. It often means you've evolved beyond the version of yourself others were comfortable with. The higher you rise in consciousness, the fewer people will truly see you. And that's not loneliness, that's clarity. Your energy will begin to speak before your mouth does. Your silence will become magnetic, and slowly explaining will feel unnatural, because your truth has become embodied. In the beginning, this silence may feel uncomfortable. Your old identity will crave validation. You'll want to prove that you've changed for the better. But don't let time reveal it. Let energy speak. As you remain still, you'll notice something strange. People will start explaining themselves to you because your energy no longer chases. It invites. You've moved from seeking understanding to being understanding. That is the quiet power of individuation. That's when everything changes. So remember, you do not owe explanations for your healing, your choices, or your peace. The people who truly see you will never require them, and those who demand them were never really listening. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop negotiating your worth, and in that silence you finally hear the one voice that truly matters, your own. If this spoke to your soul, subscribe to Deep Psyche, where every video helps you uncover the hidden dimensions of your mind and spirit.